Hey guys, I'm Kirsty Holmes from Powerful, and today I'm working with Naturopath Nikiita Jackson, and we're going to discuss female hormones and how they play such a massive role in women's health. First up, Nikiita, do you want to explain a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. So, my name is Nikiita and I am a naturopath, currently working out of the gym Strength and Motion Academy. And basically what I do is I help women with their health, I help women with their hormones. I see both men and women, but women's health and women's hormones is my clinical focus and my passion. So I basically use herbs and supplements and dietary advice and lifestyle advice to help figure out what's going on with someone, get to the bottom of their health issue, and then use all of those tools to treat whatever's going on with them.
Awesome. And Nikiita's also helped me a lot with my hormones as well, so that's why we're collaborating.
Yeah.
So first up, for somebody who knows absolutely nothing about hormones, what are they?
Cool. So hormones are basically little chemical messengers that our brain uses to communicate to the rest of our body to make our body do certain functions. You can sort of think of it as like our body being a symphony, right? And then all the different cells in our body can be compared to the different orchestra members. And all of these members do different things and they have different functions or they play different instruments. Now, in the same analogy, the conductor at the front of the orchestra can be compared to our brain, which is actually sending out the signals to the rest of the orchestra to do whatever they're meant to do. Same thing happens in the body. Our brain actually sends out signals to the rest of our cells, and then our cells do different functions and all sorts of things. And the way that these communicate is actually through hormones.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so the way that these hormones actually sort of attach to the cell and actually elicit a response is, you can sort of think of that more like a little radio. And on the radio you have a little antenna, and that antenna is tuned into a specific frequency, and then when that frequency flies past, the radio tunes in and it makes a certain noise or a certain song. Same thing happens in the body. The cell is actually, it has a little antenna, or what we like to call a receptor, and then that receptor is actually tuned into a specific hormone. Then when that hormone flies past, the hormone will actually attach to the receptor, and that will elicit, a certain function.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
They're quite delicate then, aren't they?
Yeah.
So in the grand scheme of things, we want our orchestra to be playing nice and smoothly, but what often happens in women's bodies?
So when it comes to women, we have the trifecta of hormones. So we have our thyroid hormones, which is responsible for our metabolism. We have our sex hormones, which is estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, among other ones, but they're the main ones. They're responsible for our sexual function and all of our hormonal sort of processes. And then lastly, we have our adrenal hormones, which is mainly cortisol, but also adrenaline and noradrenaline. And together, these actually make up hormonal balance in a woman. So often you'll find if one of these are out of balance, whether it be their sex hormones, their thyroid hormones, or their cortisol, it often throws the rest off as well. So we really want to make sure each area is balanced, because if one of them gets thrown off, then usually you'll find a woman has imbalances in all of these areas.
Wow. So it can't, sometimes it's just one area and sometimes it's a bit of a combination of different ones that are affecting how the woman's body presents. And if somebody had a hormonal imbalance, what are some of the symptoms that you'd see? Quite broad.
Everything. When it comes to hormonal imbalances, it can really have such a diverse effect on a woman, and it's very different for every woman depending on what they're experiencing, what their genetics are, a whole heap of different things. So some hormonal symptoms you can expect to see include things like acne, maybe painful periods, heavy periods, breast tenderness, moodiness, PMS symptoms, anything from a slow metabolism, perhaps fat gain in certain places that they didn't used to have this fat. You might run a bit cold, you might be anxious, you might not sleep well, skin health. Hormones literally affect everything in a woman's body. So if someone has some sort of hormonal imbalance, it could present in many different symptoms.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So hormonal balance could be underlying heaps and heaps of symptoms that you're seeing in your body that you might not be addressing.
Yeah, for sure.
And this is why we are addressing hormones today, because I find when you're working on your fitness, your health and your wellness, It gets you to a certain point, and then sometimes some symptoms or underlying conditions, you may need to work deeper to find the true cause so that you can heal your hormonal imbalance and see much better balance within your health and your lifestyle. Yeah, but as you can see, hormones play such a massive role in your body.
Yeah, and that's the thing when it comes to this whole like dogma of like calories in, calories out, like it's not that simple. A woman could have a thyroid imbalance, which is making her metabolism really slow. She could have insulin resistance, which is messing with her testosterone, and that's why she's putting on weight. So it's really important to be aware of hormonal imbalances, because you could be trying as hard as you can and not getting anywhere because actually there's something else going on.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You know, the underlying principle seems very simple. Sometimes it's a little bit more complicated.
For sure. Yeah.
But in saying that, you can work through them and you can see massive changes in your hormonal health from working on this. So going down this path, do you want to tell us a little bit about your story and how you've discovered hormones and how your life's transformed?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Yeah, so I wasn't always interested in women's health and women's hormones. It was about 5 years ago that I decided to study naturopathy. And this was just out of a passion for more so herbs and health, but not necessarily hormones, so to speak. But funny enough, during this journey, I actually developed some hormonal imbalance symptoms myself. So it was about maybe a year into my university degree of naturopathy, I decided to go off the pill. Just because I was like, this isn't serving me anymore. I want to see what it's like not to be on the pill. I want to see what my body is like then. Perhaps I'll feel a bit different. So I stopped the pill and everything seemed fine. It was about 3-4 months. Everything was good. I got my period back and I was like, oh, that was an easy transition. But turns out that my body still had, a lot of balancing to do when it came to my hormones. So what ended up happening is I started developing heart palpitations, which you wouldn't normally think is a hormonal symptom, but it was for me. So this is what I mean, like these hormonal symptoms can manifest in many, many different ways. And my first symptom was heart palpitations. I remember the first time it happened, I was just sitting there at work. I was a dental assistant at the time, and I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden I just felt my heart just drop in my chest. And it scared me so much because I'd never had that happen before, and I got all sweaty and all clammy. I just didn't know why that had happened. I thought maybe I'd exercised too hard or drank too much coffee, but really what I found out later is it was because all my hormones were out of whack. So that was the first symptom that sort of popped up for me. And then I think the next symptom I started getting was really chronic headaches. So I had this really sore head constantly. It lasted for almost a year, just this chronic headache of this rubber band had been wrapped around my head and pulled really tight. And I would wake up like that, I would go to sleep like that. It would stop me from wanting to interact with people because I was just in this constant pain. And at the time I had no idea it was hormonal. I honestly thought I was dying half the time because I had heart problems, I had head problems, and I was like, maybe there's something seriously wrong with me. And then this came with a whole bunch of other symptoms eventually, like gaining fat on my legs where I used to never gain fat there. I got quite painful periods. My cycle was really irregular. I was quite anxious. I had very severe panic attacks, so much so I went to hospital a couple of times. I couldn't really function as a normal person anymore, and I had no idea why. And I had a suspicion that it might have been my hormones because that's one of the only things that had changed for me, but I went to the doctors. They did a hormonal test on me, and they did a Holter monitor around my heart to see if there was anything going on there, and everything came back fine. So they just told me I had anxiety and that I should take beta blockers.
Oh no.
Which luckily I said no to because there was a part of me that was like, oh, that doesn't feel right. Like, I'm not just an anxious person. Like, how can you just label me an anxious person when I never have been in my whole life? And where did it come from, Like, I wanted to get down to the bottom of it. So I declined the medication and sort of went on with my journey of finding out what was wrong with me. And then eventually I came across a podcast by people called ATP Science. And in this podcast, it actually talked all about going off the pill, potential things that can happen when you do go off the pill. It talked about the balance between estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, all your sex hormones, and symptoms that can arise from having imbalances in these areas. And I was just like, yes, that's me. And then I finally sort of came to the realization that, I had a hormonal imbalance. So luckily for me, they were actually in Perth the next day, which was
wow.
crazy. So I ended up going to their seminar. I learned so much about hormones. I actually purchased 2 different supplements, like a sex hormone balancing supplement and also a cortisol balancing supplement. Took those, and within like hours of taking the cortisol balancing supplement, like I felt normal again. I felt, well, not completely normal, but my anxiety went away. Yeah. I felt really calm, so calm that I was almost a bit tripped out, because it was like, whoa, this is what like normal, like feeling like normal is like. And then bit by bit, my symptoms actually started to disappear over the few months of taking these supplements. And now I feel honestly better than ever. Like, this was a few years ago, so I felt good for a while now. But yeah, I went from being really bad, like not being able to talk to someone, being so anxious, going to hospital constantly, to now basically having no hormonal symptoms at all, and actually welcoming and loving getting my period. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, that made me really, really passionate about women's health and women's hormones, because I felt really unsupported during that journey. I felt like my doctor couldn't really understand what was going on with me. I was told that I was just anxious, and it took me a lot of effort to actually get to the bottom of what was going on. So I really am passionate about providing that information and that knowledge and that service to other women, so they don't have to feel, scared.
So it's so awesome to hear your story, like really inspiring, and so awesome to hear, because I believe that so many women have no idea what's going on in their bodies. And you had the same thing. Mm-hmm. So what's inspired you to do naturopathy now? So when you came through and you saw ATP science, were you just like, I need to help women? Is that your passion and your driving factor now?
Yeah, pretty much. Like I was already doing the right degree to sort of help women. It was actually quite perfect. But doing all this extra learning about my hormones and women's health and women's hormones was actually... it was extra to the course. The course didn't actually sort of dive as deep as what I did when I actually was discovering all these things. So it felt like a perfect opportunity to merge the stuff that I had already learned at uni and a lot of this traditional knowledge with more upcoming information about health and hormones. So it just felt like that was the path that I was meant to go down. And now that I am, I find I'm still constantly learning, and there's still... there's so much, reward, or, it's a really rewarding path to go down, because it's really nice to help women with their hormones, because often women are very confused about what's going on with them, or they're not, women's health is one of the most neglected areas of the orthodox medical system. We didn't start doing studies on women until the 1990s or something, so it's
really?
Literally. So it's such a young area of medicine, and it hasn't gotten much attention, so I find it very rewarding to be able to help women out with their health and with their hormones, because a lot of women haven't had that support from the orthodox medical system.
I truly feel that, and I completely understand that journey as well. I might explain a little bit about my journey as well, because Nikiita's helped me a lot with understanding where I'm at, but my journey is completely different, because yours was more based around your imbalance of the sex hormones and taking the pill, which is a artificial hormone going into your body. Mm-hmm. Mine was more self-affected. Yeah. So when I started my fitness journey, because obviously I'm more involved in health, wellness, fitness, that scheme of things, it was very much eat right, exercise, and all your problems will be fixed. You'll be great, your body will look awesome, you'll have endless energy, you'll be fit as hell. So my journey started off being a little bit too intense. So I ate quite low calories. I was restricting my diet and cutting out carbohydrates, because that's what the time was encouraging. They're like, to be healthy, you need to reduce carbohydrates. You need to eat lots of veggies and protein and good fats. So that's what I did. And of course, exercise, they're like, go hard or go home. It's as long as you're training every day, you're getting fit, you're building muscle, you will be healthy. And that's where my journey started. So obviously that's where I learned heaps of my knowledge about nutrition and training. But that quickly nosedived within a couple of months, because I had no understanding of my delicate hormonal system at all. So what happened to me was, as my exercise levels increased, my nutrition decreased, my body just couldn't keep up anymore. It couldn't stabilize, it couldn't balance its hormonal cycle. So I ended up with heaps of symptoms that were kind of knocking on my door. I'd be like, help, like look after your hormonal health. Some of these were, I used to get really severe acne, like I would get really deep hormonal acne, and I would try obviously all the external ways to get rid of it, which didn't help. I got really exhausted. I got adrenal fatigue in the end, so I just burnt my adrenal glands, which we'll talk about in a minute, to the ground, and I was just so tired. Like every day I'd get out of bed and I'd have like 2 coffees to get out of bed and actually get going, which didn't help. It spiked it even more. And then I ended up just with extreme fatigue, and then I started seeing like the huge imbalance in my menstrual cycle. Like I'd have weeks or months where it would come every 2 weeks, and then another month where it wouldn't come at all. And then it would be 6 weeks or 8 weeks before I got it again, and it would be so painful and irregular and horrible. And this hadn't happened because after I'd initially gotten my period, it regulated itself, and I was pretty happy with where it was at. So having it go all over the place, I was like, something's completely wrong with me. And then I started to see the most vain part was stubborn fat gain in areas that I'd never had fat before. Like I'd get really bad little pockets of fat on the outside of my thighs and my belly. And of course, trying so hard, that was very frustrating to me, being in the fitness and wellness industry and not seeing the external results that I wanted. So that was a time and a wake-up call for me to actually go and be like, something's going on that's not just to do with my nutrition and my lifestyle. In fact, what I'm doing, I'm pushing too hard. So I started seeing a functional doctor at the time, and then I did get a little bit of help from a naturopath. And that started my journey by saying, girl, you've got adrenal fatigue, your cortisol levels have just started going haywire, which we'll talk about. Cortisol is your stress hormone. And then it had eventually flatlined. Like I just had no cortisol going on, and I was using caffeine and forcing myself to get up each day. And this cycle was just ending up with an absolute hormonal shitstorm. And it ended up being really difficult for me to get back on that path of health. The functional doctor I saw noted all these things and said, this is where you're at. You really need to start eating more. You need to focus on your cortisol, reduce your caffeine, sleep more, and do all these things that my brain did not want to do because I thought I was going to hustle till I get amazing results. And unfortunately, it did take a little bit of a road of, I did have to gain a little bit of body fat. I did have to reduce my caffeine intake heavily. I did have to force myself to sleep and work less and train less. But I eventually got back to the place where I was quite comfortable and happy with my hormones again. My cycle regulated, my skin started to clear up. But then that still was kind of like maintaining for a few years, and then I finally saw Nikki, and she helped cut through a few of the deeper ones, like the caffeine was one of the biggest ones, and just understanding my hormonal cycle a little bit better to help me now balance my hormones so that I'm at a really comfortable place. My body fat's really healthy now, I'm at a really comfortable level, and I maintain it on very high calories. My exercise, I'm only training 3 times a week full body strength, which is nothing like I was doing before, and again, still maintaining my strength, still maintaining my body. I do a little bit of cardio, I don't drink much coffee anymore at all, and my body feels so good. And I thank Nikki for helping me with that last little bit of being like, get your hormones balanced, to feeling the best that I have in ages. And now where this talk is coming from is the combination of our experiences and also Nikiita's knowledge and expertise, I think will help so many women to understand their own hormonal cycle in their body more, because there is such an untapped potential of health that you're sitting on that sometimes nutrition training alone cannot tap into. So yeah, hopefully that helps you guys understand more about hormones. Where do we get started? So we're going to discuss a little bit more about each of those aspects you discussed briefly. So your sex hormones, your thyroid hormones, and your cortisol, or your stress hormones, adrenal hormones. But yeah, where should we get started? What's the first thing?
I think the first thing is really just getting to know your body and getting to know your own symptoms, and maybe even, I really love telling women to get either like a menstrual app or even just a sheet of paper or a diary and actually start jotting down symptoms that they're experiencing throughout the month, if it's cyclic or not, and actually getting to know what they are experiencing, so then they can dive deeper into why that might be. And hopefully watch our video next time on all the different hormones and actually how these hormone imbalances can manifest in the body, because then you can be like, it's that one for me, or maybe it's estrogen dominance, or maybe it's a lack of progesterone, or whatever it might be. But until you really hone in on your symptoms, you sort of don't really know like where to go from there. So yeah, I'd say tracking it, getting to know your body, getting to know if there's a cyclic nature to anything, and just staying tuned to next time when
starting to listen in.
Yeah.
Good. And I also think we have a little quiz that you guys can do. So
yeah, that would be really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So we've got a little quiz that we'll link below in this video, and this will just give you a little tick box list of what symptoms you're currently experiencing and what hormonal imbalances that may be correlating with. Because like we said before, although there's heaps of symptoms, if you get a cluster of symptoms, that starts to give you a bit more of a story about what might be happening in your body and what area might be actually affecting you the most. Like I said, mine was actually my cortisol levels that were affecting my sex hormones, my thyroid, and how my body was reacting. Whereas Nikiita's was more so from the artificial hormones that were in her body affecting her sex hormones. So give that a little go, guys, and watch our next videos on all these aspects of hormonal health so that you can understand your body to a much deeper level.